Can you hear me at the back? If you've just come in for a sit down and a sleep, I'll talk very quietly, and you can just, if you want to sleep, go to the back. Is that all right? It's very nice of you to turn up and see me make things that you can probably make yourself, but you'll probably do things in a slightly different way, and that's really the point, I think, that after working for about 40 years doing working towards what I make at the moment, your habits change, your tools wear out and you get a new one, and things work in slightly different ways. So I'm sort of interested to know if I can show you something that it might be a light bulb moment, why haven't I done it like that? Or you might be able to tell me, well, why are you doing that? Because it works better if you do such and such. Happy for it to be a conversation, all right? What I thought I'd do would, first of all, instead of throwing pots, I thought I'd do it in reverse and start with the finished things and then work back towards the beginning, because you've got to do something that is slightly memorable. So, with glazing, I've brought 3 items from my stand just over the way there. This is... Are you picking this up on there? Lovely. This is a footed bowl. This is a bottle with a narrow neck and a narrow foot. And this is a mug. So, starting with talking about glazing, I've used about 35 different coloured glazes that I've developed over the years. A lot of them are made from up to, say, 10 different ingredients that are put together in particular proportions. And first tip is get really good scales that you can measure a degree, say a quarter of a gram, as different from half a gram. And I've got one of those ones with sliding bars and a wheel. So you sort of see, as you come towards the weight, a needle comes up, and you can see whether you're slightly under, slightly over. But some ingredients, in this, the cobalt that makes this blue, there's only about 2% of that in 98% of a colourless glaze. Well, if you overdo it or underdo it, you're going to get quite a different blue. So you need to have really good scales to replicate what you've maybe done as a small batch for a test up to a bigger batch. What I do is I tend to not make up more than a kilo of glaze for any colour. A lot of my glazes I only make up half a kilo, and that fills one of these sort of ice cream pots. And that's obviously not deep enough to dip things into, but I do quite a lot of spraying. I guess a lot of people don't have a spray facility, but if you've got a round, disused food pot, maybe another sort of ice cream tub, or I don't eat much ice cream, honestly. They just last a long time. But something about that diameter, when you've put your half kilo weight that makes that amount of glaze, it will about 2/3 fill something like that, and when you plunge your pot in, by displacement, the glaze raises up on the outside. And it's amazing how many things you can glaze with a very small volume of liquid. So that's the first thing on that. If I'm going to dip a piece like this, I don't know if you find this, a dark coloured glaze will leave a dirty mark on the underneath of your clay. This is all porcelain, and porcelain, you like it because it's very white. Well, if you get a dirty mark on the underneath, it's unsightly. So I've found a way that I can avoid that happening by painting a little bit of transparent glaze or a white glaze just on the underneath, and then dip in the cobalt glaze, and then when you wipe that off, it all comes off and you end up with a white bottom again. Very, very handy. And with things like this, I tend to hold it by the neck. The neck you see here has got a different colour. It's got my bronzy gold on it. And so I'm only dipping it up to that line there, cleaning the underneath. Then it goes back on the wheel, and I'll put on here, using a paintbrush much like this, just a brush full of a mixture of manganese and copper, which when it fuses, it's got a little bit of red clay in it to bind it together. It's quite a common recipe. You use 3 parts of manganese, 1 part of copper and 1 part of red clay. You need it to sieve it well, and then that will work at lots of temperatures to make this bronzy gold. So you just dip it in the pigment, and as the pot's going round on the wheel, I usually support both hands together, just put that, and then this ring is just holding the brush still, and then it melts and becomes that. So that's fairly clear. Insides of things, I tend to use a transparent glaze. You can tell when it's clean when it's got a transparent glaze. If it was a dark and a matte glaze, it tends to pick up like tea stain, coffee stain. They clean much better when it's got a clear transparent glaze. So what I do for that is, in order to get this glazed, I will pour. Let me think how I've done this one. I think this one I've held inside, and then I stir up my pale blue glaze, and I plunge that in so the level's coming up to here, then lift it up and shake it off and wipe the bottom. Again, I will have painted the bottom of that. Anything I dip in, I've painted the underneath with a bit of clear glaze first, so that comes off cleanly. And then when that's dry, or at least it's had a couple of hours to dry off a bit, the inside hasn't got any glaze, so I'll pour with a jug, pour some transparent glaze in, and then in order to not get transparent glaze onto the colour on the outside, I put my finger there and I pour it out over that edge. It works. All right, so you've got one glaze on the inside, different glaze on the outside. That goes back on the wheel, and another brush load of the pigment goes. This is very unstable, this wheel. We need a prop under one leg. So anyway, holding the brush there, just painting some on the top, some on the bottom, and a little stroke on the handle. And then it fuses together to make the finished look. Right, that's pretty much the glazing side of things. You can ask me any questions if you think I'm missing out. Right, I made some things a day or two ago, and I've brought them along. So here's a mug without a handle. I'll throw something like this as the last part. But what have we got on our PowerPoint, please? Can I? Oh, you said that it was going to pop up over here. Right. It is under that one. That's too much, actually. That one. Yeah. I think. I don't know. This back corner could do with something. Right. Yeah. While you're doing that. Oh. Okay. Are we between? That's perfect. That's perfect. Yeah. I just laid out some of my tools, my favourite tools, on my studio floor. So I've got a scraper, which is a wallpaper scraper, not a proper pottery tool, a reimagined domestic use tool. That's that one. Let's tip them out, then I can find them as they're showing. That's a little sponge. I find small sponges to be very useful rather than a great big sponge. That big. You can cut them off with scissors. What else have we got there? This is a sort of scourer thing. That's very useful for getting any little lumps off before you bisque fire. This is a cotton reel. This is what I cut all my pots off with. It's button thread. Other finer cotton, it will just break, but this is quite strong. After every week or so, it will snap on me, and then you just unroll the next bit. Whereas using a a wire like that, when they break, it's a bit of a nuisance, isn't it? Because you've either not got another one, or you have to make it that much shorter, and they, you know. But a cotton reel. I once went to a demonstration, a handling session at a museum in Colchester, and handled a load of Roman pots. And if you look at underneath Roman pots, they were obviously cut off with a piece of cord like this, and I've had this one on the go for 15 years at least, I think, and there's still several years left on there. So I'll be using that in a moment. And, well, the normal wire, I use that for wedging, so I'll be doing a little bit of wedging in a moment. Can I have another picture? Right, these are sort of turning tools, sponge on a stick. Sponge on sticks. Do you use those conical ones, or this is just a piece of sponge tied onto an old paintbrush handle with a bag wire twisted round it, and I'll just let that soak a little bit because it's dried out. Now then, where's this is a very useful thing. It's an indelible pencil. They used to write postcards with these before ballpoint pens were invented, and it leaves a purple mark. It works better than an ordinary pencil if you want to draw on damp outside of clay. Don't know where you get them from though, because that's very old, that one. I've had that for 40 years. Okay, this, can you see this bit in the picture? That's a bit of thin plastic bag. That I do all my rims, tidy up rims with a bit of plastic bag. The thinner the better. Not quite cling film, but that will probably have been with me for about 5 years. I look after funny little bits of stuff. Those are standard pottery making turning tools. The circular one, I think that's also for pulling sort of coils with, but that's very useful if you've got a tight curve, inside curve you want to turn. I find that one useful. This one with the circle and the point, I seem to use that one quite a bit. But my most usual turning tool is just the potter's knife. I don't know if anyone turns with one of them, but that's my go-to one. And this flexible metal pallet, kidney, whatever we call them, that's a small one, very flexible, and you can get any curve with that. That's one of my very favourite tools. This one is it's got sprung steel ends. I don't know what to call this. I've always called it scrapey thing. But so if I lose it, and I managed to buy another one of these from, what's that sculpture place by the British Museum? Terenti's. I bought another one of these, so I've got a spare in case scrapey thing ever goes missing. I've got should we have another? Let's have another picture. So that's an old hacksaw blade, which is a very fine tooth. But I use that for where I'm joining two surfaces together. That's all the tooth I give it. Very fine. I don't do any sort of scratching, cross-hatching. Don't do any of that. That's a waste of time for me. Maybe not for you. And this one here is a hook of. This was an old bit of bandsaw, I think. But any stiff bit of wire that you sharpen one end, that bounces. That's used for chattering. Has anyone, hands up if you chatter? Okay, so does your chattering tool look like that? Okay, bit. I mean, virtually anything works. I'll give you a little show of that. This is a cardboard template. I have these for quite a few of my objects that I make. It tells me the height and the width. This has got it's got a notch out of it, so that's a small version of a mug, and that's a large one. So porcelain shrinks by the difference between that height and the top of there. So I use that for measuring, and then I've got a couple of these calipers. Let's just shower the floor with that. So that's sort of for the width and another one which would be for the height, which, funnily enough, is that. So I can either have that in the wheel. This, if I keep this in the wheel and I'm making 40 mugs, this will go soggy, and I don't want to lose that because that's important information. So I will transfer those bits of information onto 2 of them, and they can stay in the wheel. Right. So what we're doing now is making a handle and putting a foot ring on. So I threw these a couple of days ago. They're leather hard. You take them off the wheel and they've got a little bit of a rough bottom. So if I come over here and hand on the top, and I just roll round like that, and then lick my thumb, and just go round once, then it might need a tiny bit of cleaning up with a sponge. If you damp it very slightly, you can get rid of all of the marks of the cotton, because they're minute. And then the most important bit is this. If I hold that up, can you see that? It's a little bit of bisque-fired clay that's got my name in reverse on the back of it, and that it comes from your credit card or your debit card, where they have your name raised up. So press an almost dry bit of clay onto the raised up name and then shave it down. And my way of dealing with signing my work is, if you can read it, they can look you up. If you have a logo that is interlocking shapes or whatever, it's pretty hard to pin down. So that just gets pressed in there. So that's signed, as will be this one. Now, all of my mugs have slight variants to them. This one has got a zigzag at the bottom, if you're picking that up. That was done with a turning tool, a modelling tool that's got a zigzag top. So that's just held at the bottom. I shall make one of them later. This one, straight down and then a bit of a curve at the bottom. I like, if I'm making a set of mugs, they've all got something slightly different about them, apart from the weight of the clay and the height and the width. So there's always sort of choice, and they work as a family rather than being all the same. Right, these bottles, right, this is the next thing. So they've got a bit of raggedy top, and the bottom's too wide, so they need a bit of trimming. So what we need for this is, right, these are chucks. These are thrown tubes which have a different size top and bottom, and I've made 3 or 4 of these, and they're bisque fired, or they can be quite high fired actually, and they just last forever. Some people throw a lump for every bit of turning they do, but this is my choice. So I'm going to be turning those, and I've got a bowl here with a foot ring inside it, and I'm going to be turning and joining those. So we need a paintbrush like that, and with some slip in here. So that's ready for use. We want a turning tool, or a choice of turning tools, and we want the whatever that is, the saw blade. So let's have a look. This could be very interesting. That might. That's it. I think that's good.
That's on the wire.
Is it on the wire? Okay. Well, it'll probably be worse when it's not.
See if it works.
No.
It was all right here.
Yeah. Well, can you put that underneath there? Right. Let's just try. one more fold should do it. Happy?
Sure.
Yeah, think so.
You're totally off the camera though.
Can you move the camera? Huh?
I can move the camera.
Right, he can move the camera.
Sure.
Right, wheels going round. That's good. So, in order to get the top of the pot fairly neat, I finish the top before I do the bottom. So I've just put a tiny bit of dampness on the wheel head, and then, oops. Right, this is a slightly finer Stanley knife that has become a pottery tool. I'll sharpen that. Can you, whoops, hold that down there. And that's kinder, because it being sharper and thinner, it allows for quite a neat cut. Now trim the inside a little bit and the outside a little bit. Funny your hand gets a bit wobbly when you're talking in front of lots of people. And a little bit of sponge there. So that's as neat as I want that one to be. This one, I'll do the same thing. Don't need to do two of everything, but oh, right, centering. Can you do this trick where every time it goes round, you're sort of looking straight down at a line that's moving like that? You're not seeing it moving like that. I'm seeing it moving in and out. And so every time it's at the furthest point away, I give it a little tap until it doesn't move anymore. It's worth spending 1 hour just doing that over and over again, because then you can almost guarantee that you can tap, about 4 taps will centre something, rather than it always taking sort of 5 minutes. I'm just creating a platform with my thumb and finger so that I can get a flat top. As you can see, the neck's not bolt upright, but when things stop moving round and they come out the kiln, you can't really tell that they're not perfectly round. That's my excuse. Okay, right, for turning the underneath, I'm going to centre this chuck and damp its bottom and damp its ring. Then we've got to get a bit of this squidgy stuff called clay. It's very wet. I probably won't be able to throw very well with this, so you'll have to forgive me. Normally clay like that I'd make into round sausages, stand them on the desk for about half a day, and they might have dried off enough to use. But getting it out of the bag soaking wet is like having your arms tied behind your back. Right, just make sure there's no dried clay on that rim. And that's going to go upside down. What I normally do, I've got a very small woodworker's spirit level, which I can sit on the top and watch the bubble and sort of move it so it's dead flat. Otherwise, you can do this and close one eye and see where the highest bit is. And eventually, that's not bad, I think. So, this is to trim the underneath to get it the sort of width that I want it. Anyone got any questions? It is bisque fired. Thank you very much. Yeah. Right. So this is turning. I usually put a little bit of water as a lubricant, and then put the knife in about a centimetre or so, and then come down on that bit and cut that piece off, and then wet my knife again, and that will probably take me all the way down. So that's done most of the turning that I need. Then I'm just going to follow the line so it's as round as it can be. It's my choice to have a narrow foot and a wide belly. I don't tend to turn foot rings, so they're flat across the bottom. Again, that's my choice. It's one more operation I really don't think I need to do. And then making sure there's no dry bits on the edge of this. This will just encourage it to have a fairly flat profile. Without too many ridges. And at this point you can sort of see whether there's not quite enough turned off at that point. Does this work as a remote sort of experience? Because I can see you're at the wrong angle to see most of this and too far away. So I hope it's valuable. So that's that. Now, where's the name stamp gone? They hide. There it is. So that's just on the edge. Can't press too hard in the middle. Oops. So that's pretty round. I won't do the other one of them, but we'll move on to turning a bowl. What I can do now is I can use this turned off bit of clay. If I dunk that in water, I do most of my reclaim of clay at this stage. Rather than building up loads of dry stuff, putting it in a great big bucket somewhere and recycling it. If all you do, if you've got a handful of damp things, just put it in water, screw out the water, put it back in your bag of clay, and 10 minutes later you can use it. So I don't really build up any amount of recycling. I can recommend that. So the next stage in the dance of clay today is going to be. Now you can see I've had this in this box and it's gone a bit off round. Not the end of the world, but I wouldn't normally want that to happen. Okay, this is the foot ring, and I'll show you how I make that shortly in this weird backwards world of Baxter. So I just trim the outside, just on the damp wheel head. It doesn't really need anything to hold it in place. So just trim that in and out. And then that's got to be dead flat. It might be dead flat, but it's probably not. So I tend to cut from the middle forwards, and it's all about balancing one thing against the other. If that knife was free moving, you wouldn't really be able to control it. By keeping elbows in, maybe fingers on the wheel head, linking your hands together somehow. It's quite easy to control. See what I did there? The thing about these wheel heads is they've got these concentric circles. I throw everything on wooden bats, so you don't have that. You can draw concentric circles with your pencil, or you can just tap it till it looks right. Anyway, so that's now got a flat bottom, and using the serrated edge of this knife. Can you see those? Not really. It's very fine, serrated circles. Anything good? There. Nah. Anyway, it looks a bit like that in miniature. The next thing is to put the bowl itself. I'll make it as round as I can by eye. That looks okay. Damp the edge. If you find things, you think it will stick to that, but it doesn't. You probably needed to just smooth the rim. Porcelain is very smooth. If you use rougher stoneware and use a sponge on it, you're going to be exposing the grit. Oh, sorry, that was right in the middle first time. Let's do a couple of. That's good. That was three and a bit taps. Right, that's now going to be made into a sausage to hold it down. I always hold it from the top and press down on the wheel rather than in, because you'll dent the bowl, which is not ideal. 3 points of contact is sufficient, and that shouldn't move. Now, I really need to get my calipers to get the width, but I can do it easily this way, tapping that into the middle and using my knife, just mark a circle, which is the width that I need to bring it into. And then, right, fingers on the outside, finger on the blade of the knife. I seem to think that a lot of people spend ages turning, and really I've seemed to have reduced it to quite a short time just to get a clean line. Sometimes I actually join the foot ring on first so that it can sort of flow into the foot ring, but other times it has a sharper profile. That one, that might have a groove in it actually. Right, just damp that and compress the bottom a little bit. Then more serrated edges where it's going to join, and then paint some slip on both surfaces. Porcelain sort of rots in the time that you're using it. So this bowl of slip has gone grey and it smells pretty horrible. I've no idea why. Anyone got an explanation for that? It hasn't got paper in it or anything, but it does that. But it means that I can see where I've put the slip and where I haven't. Right, that's then got to be put. That's nicely in the centre. Then that just wants squeezing very gently in about 5 or 6 points around, so that any air, which there shouldn't be any because it's a fairly flush joint, and any spare slip. Right, slip is about 1/3 clay and 2/3 water. Clay is about 1/3 water and 2/3 clay. So if you're leaving lots of slip in a joint, it's got to lose loads of water to become the same as the clay. So if you can get rid of as much of it as possible by squeezing it out, and then whether it's with your fingernail or a paintbrush or whatever, get rid of the slip. It should all become the same material as quickly as possible, and then you shouldn't get any cracking. Does that make sense? Yes. Right, I'm just helping this have a roundish profile all the way up, and I tell you what, it's much darker here than I would normally work, so I can't see what I want to see. Right, then the top just needs a little bit of turning because it's picked up some iron oxide from the top of the wheel. And porcelain, why do we like porcelain? Because it's very white, It's very strong, so you can work it really thin, and when you get it thin enough, it also becomes translucent. So if you lose any of them, you might as well be using a stoneware clay. But really, the translucency is the sort of icing on the cake for it. I don't need a translucent foot ring though, so they tend to stay a bit thicker. So that's nicely joined on. Then name goes in the rim like that. Lovely. Take them away. Then that should move. Now, when I make them on bats, the bats lift off, and then I can turn that sideways and just give it a little tap to get the pot off. This, oh, that came off. That's all right. So probably it's a good idea to just get, oh, right, this one, actually, this has got a little pip in the bottom, which I do on some pots, which you can see on my stand. What I should have done was to hollow out, because if it's got a pip standing up, it's nice to have a little hollow on the inside to match it. So that's just about. I should have done that before I took the foot ring off. Put the foot ring on. But you get the idea. That's now got a hollow there and a pip there. I'm just going to check how round it is. You should be able to help it round by damping it and then using this profile on the inside and sponge on the outside. It doesn't do that. Anyway, that's nice enough. So that's got its foot ring joined on. Why do I put a foot ring rather than turning it? I hear you say. You can make the foot ring as tall as you want like that. If you leave a thick plug of clay that you've got to turn away, it's much harder to get it all to sort of leather hard to be able to turn it. And not have the rim go too hard because it tends to dry from the top. So this is sort of all made no thicker than about 1 centimetre anywhere, and then by adding the foot ring, it gives it a lift, gives it a shadow underneath. I think it's more elegant. Anyway, that's that. Right, I better do some. Oh no, we've got mug handles to do. Now, I used to make all my handles using a wire loop that I drag through a piece of clay, peel back the sides and take out the strap and join it on. But Prue Green, who, I don't know if she's in the room, taught me how to do this 2 or 3 years ago. I've been doing this 40 years. You learn things every year, if not every week. So, a handle. Let's use this slightly hard clay because the soft stuff is going to not work properly. Where can I do this? Can you see over here? Yeah? Okay. Basically, I've never pulled handles. I find that sort of wet, sticky, takes too long. You have to be there at the right time. You can make these handles and put them in a bag, wait till you're ready, or you can speed dry them with a hot air gun till they're the same hardness as the pots you're putting them on. So this is just a small piece of clay I'm going to roll into a sausage of an indeterminate, but I'll know when it's right, thickness. And you use the palm of your hand rather than your fingers, and you can keep it nice and tubular, and then I just drop it like this from both ends. So it's now sort of D-shaped. It's got a nice curve but a fairly flat underneath. Then to get the length, actually, interestingly, the height of my mug is also the length of my handle. It's not necessarily always going to be like that, but that's the way it works for me. So I'll trim that to that, and I might as well make a second one. Right, now handles can join on in a number of ways. it can come straight out from the body, or it can go up and over, and probably lots of other things, but we'll do one of each of them. If it's going to come straight out from the body like this, I want the top to be slightly fatter, so I use a round-ended handle just to, can you see that? It flares out, and then that can be folded over and press. So that's sort of finished, but there's no pot yet. Okay, and the other one, I would go flatten one end, then fold it over. It stays very flexible like this, but there's no stickiness involved. Doesn't that sound like a good idea? Right, some slip. Now I have to look for where I've put my name, which I didn't do on this one, but I did on the other one. So just above there, I'll put a blob and one up near the rim. This one, a blob there, and a blob a bit lower down, because this is the up and over handle. Then a bit of paint on there and there. I usually do them in 3s, certainly no more than 4s, because by the time you get to the 4th one, the slip's dried off and it's not sticky enough. So that goes on there, hold it inside, rock around. And then you just got to check whether the curve's right, because handles is mostly about the space that's left rather than the handle itself. Occasionally you might need a tiny coil to go in the top, but I like it to, so long as you take the slip away, you should get no cracking at all. Tiny bit of cracking, the glaze will fill. So that's that. And then yeah, that's good. This one, that's drying off nicely already. A little bit of squidging around, check that it's joined top and bottom. How are we doing for time? No idea. I'll keep. Pardon? Is it? Good heavens. I better stop in a minute then. I have nearly finished, to be fair. Right, we'll do a bit of throwing next, but it's very wet clay, so I can't promise. So that, you can aim it slightly up. You can bring it down. Anyway, go and look at my mugs, see if you like the handles. There's many ways to do such things. Right, normally I'd do some wedging with a wire, but this is so wet that it's not going to benefit. It's all uniform anyway. So what I'll just do is a small amount of clay you can wedge easily by ripping it in half and smacking it back together a few times, just to make it a homogeneous mass. But the strange thing about this Audrey Blackman porcelain, which Valentines make, it's the best clay in the world, and Valentines are a lovely company, and they're sponsoring this event. This clay is really good, but it does go sort of floppy the more you use it. So it felt wet in the bag, and now it feels like jelly. So it's not ideal for throwing with, but we'll get something out of it. If you see I'm cutting the clay in half and smacking it together, every time you halve it and smack it together, you're doubling the number of layers there are. And if I was to do that 20 times, there would be over 1 million layers within that piece of clay, just from doubling up 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, 164, 128, etc. You can do the maths if you want, or play on your calculator sometime. But if you've got a million layers, basically it's all going to be the same consistency. You're not going to have hard bits and soft bits. All right. Right. So this is how I would make a bowl. By putting the clay in the middle, wetting my hands a bit. Is there anything about that that's unusual? Probably not, it's just speed. Right, the foot ring appears at this stage as a little donut. Like that. I'll take off some of the slip. Undercut that a little bit, and then the cotton just wraps itself around, and then pull it out, and then I normally clean my fingers off a little bit, then I can lift that off. So that's what I would keep, and what you saw, you've already seen that, so that's good, you know what happens with that. And then I'll throw the bowl itself. I don't use very much water, and certainly with very wet clay, it hasn't got much structural integrity. So, right, you can't really see what I'm doing. I pinch between my finger and thumb and raise that up to the rim, and all I'm doing is supporting the outside with my right hand. This is a wheel that was working back to front, heel to toe from what I'm used to. So people always make excuses, don't they? Don't know if we'll get much of a second pull up on this. So sometimes I have a sponge on the inside or on the outside. It's like watching paint dry, isn't it? Potters watching potters potting. Right, what I always have ready to hand is the wallpaper scraper. And that's for either cleaning off bats or for making the beginning of the underneath of something like this. And I can also support the outside of that whilst sort of throwing the inside. This is twice as thick as I would normally work, but it won't stand going any thinner. But you don't need to put any water beyond this point. You can compress the bottom a little bit with the because this is soft but flexible, or flexible but it's got a bit of strength to it as well. That can be used to it takes away some of the slip as well as allowing me to stretch and keep a nice line, something like that anyway. But on a much bigger pot, you tend to throw a wide-ish cylinder that gradually gets wider and wider without really putting any more water on it. And the only other thing we haven't done is use the lovely bit of plastic bag. Now, there it is. Porcelain's so smooth anyway, this is just to get rid of any accumulated slip off the edge. So it's just wrapping around, and that's pretty much the finished rim. I wouldn't touch that again. Right, have you had enough? I think I can hear snoring. I haven't made one of these. Do you need me to make something with a narrow neck? You do. Okay. And then we're probably about out of time. Where's my wire? Can't see it. Well, so we've got to sacrifice that bowl for the greater good. Where did the other wire go? Anyone see it on the screen or anything? Oh, it's there. That's all right. We don't really need it. I just don't want to lose it. Do you have favourite tools that you really wouldn't want to lose? Yeah. Okay. This could go. This is going to have to again be much thicker than I would normally work, just because it's like jelly. But Alderley Blackburn porcelain is really good. It's very strong when it's bone dry. I used to use Limoges porcelain, and if you had a dry bowl and you tapped the rim, a piece would fall out. It had no strength to it at all. This is my favourite clay in the world. When it's the right consistency. So at this stage you'd mop out most of the water. And using 6 points of contact, finger point tips, first knuckle on second finger and thumb tips, and bring the top in a fair way. Just need to wet my finger. Now the tops of these are always raggedy, and they're improved at the stage that you've already seen. So from leather hard. That's roughly right. So it doesn't matter how thick it is at the bottom, that can be turned away. It's getting this curve and this lift right. So let's try poking that down there and using that to... This is my secret extra finger. And I don't make these to a particular size. They're whatever size they come out, so each one's its own thing, unique. Right, I can trim a bit of the top off that, but it's only a sort of staging post. It's not the finished look. No sudden movements or noises, please. There's a lot of slip on the outside of this, and it's just a case of gradually like curving that. You'll notice I don't leave much in the way of sort of finger marks, but that's a sort of design choice. I'm surprised that stood up as well as it has. It's not great, but it'll do. Good enough for Windsor. Right, and then I would trim some from the underneath. And that will do for now. Normally, some things I make on wooden bats, and they have to stay on the bat till they're hard enough to move without spoiling them. These I almost always lift off. So I'll put a little bit of water on the wheel head, and if that goes through twice, it will probably move. It will. So I can lift that up without spoiling it. Shall I drop it? Show of hands, drop it or not. Right. I think I've shown you everything I need to show you. But you can... There. That can be another bottle another day. Thank you very much. If anyone got any questions before we go, there's no retiring collection. You're free to go. So thank you very much. Good afternoon. Have a nice day.